So welcome to the All We Can Save edition of the Barnegat Bay Book Club. This is for the month of January. We were wrapping up the previous month. And we are excited to have a discussion on climate change and what it means for us here at the Jersey Shore, and particularly in Ocean and Monmouth counties where the Barnegat Bay watershed is. So our hopes with this is that we can boil down what is a huge conversation that people have made entire careers and academic pursuits out of, and bringing it to something that's a bit more digestible and something that you can feel like you participate in, because ultimately that's how we grow action around acting on this stuff. So Grace Ann and I have put together some hopefully stimulating activities to kind of get involved in this conversation and what it means for us personally and as residents of this area. Thanks for being here.
And I should mention that Avery and I both work at Save Barnegat Bay. I'm the Education and Outreach Coordinator, and Avery is the Executive Assistant. So we work together today to come up with an interactive and engaging program instead of just talking at you about the book. Obviously, we usually like to invite the author for our local Barnegat Bay books, but instead this book is an anthology of essays written by women across the United States from all different professions, scientists, policy nerds, Indigenous women, Black women, elected officials. So many different professions were reflected in this, and backgrounds and diversity. And so obviously inviting an author would be a little hard. We'd have to pick one. So we've collected all of our thoughts into what's called a Jamboard. So if you go into the chat and click on the Jamboard, and if you're watching this program afterward, we'll make sure you have access to this Jamboard.
So Grace Ann and I kind of structured tonight's conversation around different themes throughout the book that they use. So you might have noticed that they have kind of big buzzwords that organize their ideas around the climate discussion. And so in contextualizing all of this and thinking about what was most appropriate for our conversation here at the Jersey Shore, we settled on 3 different words and topics of discussion that we want to lead tonight. So I will go through them quickly, but then we'll have activities for each so we can engage in some conversation around them. So for this one, it was part 3 in the book, and the word was reframe. And so we kind of contextualized this for our own meeting with what are our personal entry points to the climate change conversation? On a personal note, what engages you the most in this conversation, in caring about this, or feeling compelled to act? And then from there, we are moving to what was part 4 with the book, and this is reshape. And so thinking about the climate conversation, how does it affect us on the coast of the Jersey Shore? So in this broad, big, abstract global conversation, what is our place within that? So this is a space for brainstorming, thinking about action, getting ready and motivated to move on these issues, and in our specific region. And then finally, we're finishing up with what was part 8 in the book, and that was rise. And this is how can we organize around change, and what solutions am I taking ownership of? So we thought this would be a fitting way to end our conversation in just a bit, to have folks leaving this feeling compelled to act and have the tools to act, actually. So it's about participation and feeling empowered to do these things. So we'll break all these big lofty words down with some activities and brainstorming, but that's just kind of an overview of what we're looking at. So we will start with reframe. So as I mentioned, I'd like you all to think of this as kind of an entry point into the climate conversation. I'm sure these buzzwords have been thrown at you on the news and media from your peers, and it can be a bit daunting to kind of boil them down to what it means for you. But in this book, in the various essays and other things that we've read in past Barnegat Bay Book Club months, it really boils down to you start with your lived experience. So you assess your own life, where you live, the community you participate in, and you take that as an entry point into the global climate conversation. So for folks who are living at the Jersey Shore, that could mean, wow, I'm seeing that my home is flooding quite often and with more frequency than it used to. That's an environmental issue that's affecting me directly, and it's causing some emotional reaction to what's going on. And so while that might be different in a lot of ways from somebody in, say, India across the other side of the world, you do have a lot of shared experiences in this big global issue. So it's recognizing climate vulnerability. So as I mentioned, your proximity to what's going on with the environment and how it's changing, and turning your attention to local awareness. So seeing what your neighbors are going through, having conversations about your shared struggle in all of this. So Grace Ann has an activity that I'll pass the baton off of. So I wanted to let that kind of just ruminate with you all, and turn your attention to the fact that we all have a role to play in this conversation and this global struggle. And it begins with our communities here in Ocean and Monmouth counties.
So I am using an icebreaker that I got from a training that I did with an activity called Climate Fresque. And if you're interested in participating in that, we're doing that program next week on Wednesday at 6 o'clock on Zoom as well. Extremely interactive, and it helps orient everyone in the room around the real facts about climate change. There's empathy, emotion, togetherness involved, but there's really it's really based in the IPCC. And so this icebreaker is a moment where you can head over to the Jamboard and click on that second slide so that you can see this image. And then you can add a sticky note from the left-hand side of the screen. There's a toolbar and there's like a square with lines on it. And you can add a sticky note to the character on the screen that you feel most describes you in the context of this conversation. So are you...
That's hard, Grace. Because
yeah, so
open to interpretation too. So you can take on a lot of different meanings from what each little person is doing.
Yeah, because we all have experience in all of this, and it's the first place to begin is to identify our experience. We can talk at you about facts, but really that's not that helpful or useful because you already have an experience of your own that we want to draw from to grow this conversation. So starting with emotional empathy and care is how we're choosing to do that. So go ahead over to the Jamboard, click on that second frame if you can, and you'll see an image with all the little people on it. And grab a sticky note on the left-hand side it's like the fourth tool down. And then you can select your color, and then your name goes on there again. And then you can drag it to the person. You can also resize it, and you can drag it over to the character that you feel describes you best. It's not supposed to be an easy exercise. It's supposed to be a thought-provoking exercise, which can be a little frustrating, right? But we can't come up with solutions if we can't identify where we are. It's kind of like when you look at a map at a mall or an amusement park and you're like looking at all the pieces and colorful, graphics, and you're going, well, where's the "you are here" sign? Because I can't tell how to use this map unless I figure out where I am on the map. And so this is kind of a way to orient ourselves. Where are we in the spectrum of this whole long and involved topic? So while we wait for the last person or two to kind of identify themselves, would anyone like to share? And it's not mandatory. Everything here is totally optional. Would anyone like to share your feelings or put words to the character you selected?
Okay, so you want me to start? I'll start.
Sure.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Okay, so I picked that, whatever that is, almost looking down, almost ready to fall over, because I can see just from the short amount of time I've lived here. I live on the island and I've moved down here, I guess a couple of years ago when I retired. So the climate issues are so important down here that I see it. I just at this point don't know where, what to do, kind of thing. I belong to that resilient LBI group.
Very good.
I participated in that, and I'm also on a subcommittee with the taxpayers on the flooding issue. So people are doing things here, and it means that somebody has to start to do them, actually, not just talk about them. So that's why I'm kind of on the edge there. I don't really know which way to go.
It's totally perfect.
Sharing.
Anyone
Next
else?
person wanna go?
I can explain mine. I took it more at a personal level. When we have high tide and we have the wind blowing a certain direction, we can't get out of our development because the road around the corner floods. So I took it more as being flexible. I mean, luckily I'm retired. I don't have to be anywhere at a given time. So I saw the rope and swinging as being flexible with environmental conditions on a given day, especially during high tide or a storm.
Nice.
I can share as well. Oh, can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. I got a weird notification. I selected the little person that's hanging on at the edge of the tree branch because I spent a lot of today doing some background research on some studies that have come out about coral reefs in the Mediterranean. So it's not, unfortunately, not the most not the happiest update. There's a lot of reefs there that are super threatened. So that was my headspace today. Was reading a lot about collapsing coral reefs, which is, sorry to be a downer, but that's the headspace that I'm in today.
Very valid. Thank you for sharing.
It can be very emotionally taxing to work in our work because we see and hear it so often. We have to continue to boost our morale and find ways to recharge for sure. I'll share. I actually put my name on a different one than I did the first time and second time I participated in this activity. I put mine on the one holding the person next to them because to me, building community has always been an important aspect of the work that I do. And I actually couldn't have articulated that years ago at the beginning of my career. But I find that that's where my strength is. I am good at creating community and building relationships. And I think that I feel as though that is the piece that I'm excited about. And it's the place that gives me hope about these conversations that if we continue building community, continue educating, we will find local and global solutions.
I can share mine. I put myself on number 20, so the little figure looking up at the big tree. And I kind of took that to mean, and liken my experience to being a young person, just staring out at the field and the problem of climate change and feeling a little bit intimidated and frustrated by how things have been going and feeling like there's a lot that I'm taking on. And that's something we've talked about before in past programming that we've done. That the experience of young people with the climate change is an especially poignant one. And so, yeah, the big tree is me looking up at all the possibility of hopefully lots of solutions and community building and opportunity to make change, but also feeling a little bit daunted by what the uncertain future holds.
And Juana, you are totally welcome to say no, you don't want to share, but do you want to share? I think you're on the guy hanging off the tree.
Yes, I'm on the guy hanging from the tree because at my age, there are not a lot of years left in my lifetime that I think we can see a definite solution for saving everything that we've been doing. In the way I feel is that we are so overpopulated this earth that it's so many of us and we are exponentially multiplying like by day, and we're polluting the environment so much and we're doing so much damage that, you know, like you say, coral reefs dying, water, everything, that it's like, for me, it's heartbreaking because, to be honest, I don't know what the future generation is going to have and how it's going to be. So it's like, I feel like we're hanging there, like just at the tip of our fingers. We're ready to lose it. And you guys and your children, they're going to have a very hard job to make sure that we save this planet and we have clean water, clean air, and everything nice for us. It's really daunting for me. It's really bad. I mean, and for me, that's, in my opinion, the biggest problem, the overpopulation, like continuous agriculture and fertilizers and polluting and taking every single space, building more houses. I mean, for me, it was eye-opening. I never been in any of those lagoons, like Fork River and all the other, until I went with the dive team, and seeing how much is built and one on top of the other, the houses and the pool and the that and the bulkheads and everything. I'm like, and the water is black, not even brown, it's black. It's so dirty with everything. I'm like, this is not normal. This is not how it's supposed to be. So I'm just scared.
So that is definitely all of the things that you all shared are valid emotions, and Juana, particularly that poignancy of just that, like, that daunting feeling that I know everyone has an inkling of, or you wouldn't be here in this program to begin with. So we're hoping through some activity and an engagement tonight that we will hopefully relieve some of that daunting feeling and empower you to feel like it's not all doom and gloom. While we do have some serious challenges ahead of us to address, we do have tools to address them. So hopefully we can make you feel just a tiny, tiny little bit less like everything is doom. I mean,
Don't
it
worry,
is, but it's not.
I'm gonna go scuba diving in the next 5 years, see everything that's possible to see. So just in case I can see it after.
And
Very
we hope
true.
that this activity kind of speaks to the complexity of the climate experience and being a person on this earth today. You go through a lot of different phases of emotions, and how you come to terms with reality and what's going on and figuring out your place and all of that. It's a lot. And it then depends on where you are in the world and your socioeconomic status and your gender and where you live and your proximity to the coastline and stuff like that. And so we're really hoping that this programming, if nothing else, helps you find your place, like in your heart, in this conversation, and what you feel like you can do to participate in an active way that makes you feel good in your mind, body, and spirit, because it really is a scary thing that's being studied by a lot of people, the mental health effects of dealing with this crisis and seeing these changes happen right in your backyard. It's a lot to take in. But it is true that there is still stuff that can be done. And so I think hopefully that'll be kind of the note that we end on with this presentation, like Grace Ann was saying. But it's really important and helpful to hear where you're all coming from in this conversation and your lived experiences with all of this. So I'm going to share my screen again. We're going to go to the next activity here, kind of moving along in this journey. So let me share this screen. Can everyone see that?
Mm-hmm.
The PowerPoint?
Yeah.
Cool. So the next one, as I said, was part 4 in the book. And this buzzword that they used was reshape. And so in thinking about what all of this means for us and for our presentation tonight, we created this question: how does climate change affect us here on the coast in the Jersey Shore? So this is kind of the in-between stage then. Like, we've entered the conversation. We see that there's a problem and we're aware of it now. And our next step in that is kind of brainstorming. Okay, what are the solutions? What's out there? What does this mean for my community? I'm getting ready to take action, but I'm not quite there yet. So this is a stage of seeing ourselves and our communities reflected in the climate conversation. And this has to do with things like adapting to the changes that we've already observed, at the Jersey Shore. That very obviously takes the shape of seeing houses that are raised higher because there's more flooding than there used to be, or the water levels are higher in the bay than they used to be. There's another word that is somewhat used in contrast to adaptation, and that's how can we create our communities to mitigate the effects of climate change? So before the crisis even happens, how can we implement systems to prevent them from reaching a crisis point in the first place? So the way that things have been kind of running in the world is we're playing a lot of catch up. We're adapting after there's a hurricane or after there's this big 100-year storm, and we're trying to pick up the pieces. So after Hurricane Sandy, there was a lot of economic devastation that went with it because we weren't prepared for this hurricane to totally wipe us out. And we didn't have those systems in place. And the last kind of word that I'll touch on, and one that they talk about a lot in the book, is the concept of interconnectedness. So all of these themes are tied together. We can't just look at the environment as being just quote unquote nature. It's the economy, it's our culture, it's our social circles, it's our interactions with neighbors and family, your own beliefs about things. That's all playing into this idea of what this struggle means for all of us. So kind of let that sit with you all as we go into this next meeting or into this next activity. So Grace Ann, if you want to explain this fancy diagram that we have.
So our question is meant to ruminate, but the Venn diagram is meant to do something slightly different. So, the first kind of thing you need to think about is, how does this affect us at the coast? And then, under that category, you can think about sea level rise and flooding, which is the most obvious and the thing that most people are going to be able to identify with. But some other things you might think about are things like invasive species, like insects and plants. You might think about seasons being slightly off-timed. You might think about access to food, that for ourselves and for birds and bees and things out in, outside of the four walls of your home. You might think about vectors, disease vectors, such as mosquitoes and ticks, and the frequency that you've been impacted by those things, or the changes you've seen over time that you've lived here at the coast. You might consider the cost of goods, or whatever things that you interface with every day that might have been impacted by climate change. A lot of this is extremely relevant right now, especially in the pandemic. We're seeing just how fragile our systems are to major catastrophe. And so once you kind of oriented your brain around some of those things, start to think about solutions. So we want to lead with solutions. We don't want to get bogged down in the problems, because we don't want to lecture you on the problems. You have lived them, you have experienced them, and we validate those experiences, and we don't want to talk at you. So in that kind of thought process, if you can go ahead and slide over to the next frame of the Jamboard, click on a sticky note, and then start adding solutions to the Venn diagram. And if there's a solution that you feel both an individual and a community can use, I think that would be effective to put in the middle. And I actually like the word community better, because community is a word that's used really frequently in this book. And it's truly going to be the solution, because it's not going to land on the individual, or rather, as Avery put it earlier, it begins with the individual, but it's not going to end with the individual behavior change in action. I think very often we are inundated with messages that it needs to be we need to make personal behavior changes, and we do. But we definitely need to consider that personal behavior changes are just the very beginning of the opportunity to create community around those same solutions. So if you can use the sticky notes, slide them over to that Venn diagram and start brainstorming, and you're going to be shocked to see that everyone brings a different kind of flavor to this. And I think you'll find that it's going to be quite encouraging, hopefully. So I'm over here. Cool, we got our first one up there. Planting native species in your yard. So while I'm just going to kind of chat a little bit, please feel free to continue putting your things up there. But in an effort to prepare for this program, I Googled making your yard a carbon sink. And I was really kind of expecting that I would see something slightly different than the normal, kind of things that we advertise as the best things to do for Barnegat Bay. Hilariously, the solutions, or not, it's actually not hilarious, it makes perfect sense. The solutions for making your yard a carbon sink to contribute to reducing climate change is actually the exact same thing you do to help Barnegat Bay, specifically by keeping your yard maintained in a different way. So, cutting your grass longer, reducing fertilizers and pesticides, planting native plants, encouraging biodiversity in the soil and in the plants, adding compost, things like that. So actually all the solutions you already are familiar with are going to be good for climate change solutions.
I don't know how I got there. I don't know where I am now. This should be pink.
Mhm.
You can double click on a sticky note that you already created and change the color.
No, that's not mine. Never mind. Oh, I just got rid of it. This is not good.
That's okay.
This is not
You're
good.
great.
I think I took someone's, wait, I got to start again then, right? Okay, hold on. Okay.
And one of the things I loved about this book so far is that throughout it, it's chock full of resources. So, to Juana's point, and to anyone who's also feeling like, I don't know what to do, what do I do next? How do I participate? This book has not necessarily the things you can do specifically, but it has the resources of the websites and the podcast and the people and the books and the essays that you can dive into to feel connected to these solutions. Being a part of this whole world of All You Can Save and the corresponding podcast and the newsletters, I keep running into the same organizations, the same things over and over again. So they're really working hard to empower everybody that participates. So Avery, as you're looking at the Venn diagram, are there any major solutions that someone hasn't covered?
I think we're coming up with some really great ones, especially in that middle part, the nexus between individual and society. So I can chat a little bit about that. So I think on the left side, you'll notice that, here I can move this back. On the left side, you'll notice that these are quote unquote small manageable steps that you can take. And I say quote unquote because any step in the right direction is not small in the grand scheme of things. It does matter quite a bit. But I just mean that it's something that the individual can do on their own. So it is taking charge of things in your own circles. So that could be planting native species in your yard, like Grace Ann said, using less fertilizer or eliminating fertilizer use entirely. That would be awesome if anyone wants to challenge themselves and do that. It's local things like regulations and changing how our communities are structured and regulated with all of that. And then looking at the right side, I think it takes the trend of these really big global ideas. So this is something that might be out of the control of the single person who's just trying to make a difference. It might be something like transitioning to collective action. That was one that I put on there. All We Can Save makes a big point about how as a culture, we kind of need to abandon this idea of the individual living in their own silo. You know, I'm separated from nature, I'm separated from my neighbor. We have independent experiences from each other. But if we really want to tackle the climate crisis, we have to see ourselves in nature, and we have to see ourselves as all in this together, or we're not going to reach these solutions. So that's a really big kind of lofty idea that has to do with societal change on the other end of the spectrum. Someone wrote, reducing emphasis on consumption. So again, that's another culture change. Prioritizing and raising awareness to the situation. So kind of from a public education standpoint, making people actually believe that climate change is a problem to begin with. Surprisingly, you know, that's easier said than done sometimes. Creation of a green economy was another one I put on there. Making it so that we have sustainable infrastructure and energy systems that aren't based on things like fossil fuels that can sustain us. That's a huge undertaking, and we have to make sure that people's jobs are safe and secure and all of that too, as we transition away from how things have been for so long. And so then those big lofty ideas and the small manageable actions come together, and it creates a beautiful thing, which is ultimately kind of what we're trying to reach here with this activity. So I see on here civic engagement. So it's a way to participate in these big lofty ideas on the local level even. You have a direct say in what you want to see reflected in your community. Building community and empathy around shared experiences. So again, it's starting with your own entry point, but recognizing that there is this collectivism that needs to happen. And then the final step in that is empathy. I see sharing conversation solutions with family, friends, and community members. So a similar kind of collectivist outlook in all of this. Grace Ann, do you want to talk about sustainability? I know that's an important word for you that you love.
I love the word sustainability, and Sustainable Jersey, which is a nonprofit organization that works throughout the whole state to empower businesses, municipalities, and schools to seek out sustainable initiatives and actions, and then they incentivize it through grant access and everything else. But the word sustainability is so important because people often put environmentalists in a box and they say, you know, you all are tree huggers, right? Like we only care about saving the trees, saving the bunnies, you know, saving the deer. But the true definition of sustainability for me is all encompassing, similar to the word conservation instead of preservation. It's the embodiment. It's the simplest word that I can use that really is the connection between the health of our people, the health of the clean water and clean air around us and the environment around us, and the health of our economy. Because if we all agree that we're going to continue to exist on this planet, we can't have a stable environment without a stable economy, and vice versa. We have already noticed that the natural resources that we depend so heavily on are impacted by the economy, and the economy is impacted by the lack of those resources if they aren't there. And it's just all interconnected. And then, of course, our health is reflected in our ability to access those resources wherever we are in the world. So the word sustainability is really all encompassing. And then with that, the word conservation, meaning we can use the resources. We can't all go live in the woods in little huts and, you know, stop using electricity and stop using cars and stop, you know, producing food. We reasonably can't do that. We're past that in our history as humans on the planet. So in the word conservation, we talk about having access to the resources, but respecting the resource enough to say, I'm only going to take as much as I need. And for me, the word sustainability is kind of the umbrella term for that. Of how can we sustainably interface with the natural spaces around us? And, you know, obviously we're all kind of searching within about our individual actions, but then of course on a societal level, you know, how can we talk about sustainability, and Sustainable Jersey is an excellent place to start kind of thinking about how you can push your local municipality, business, or school, if you work in a school, towards more sustainable initiatives, and they make it very accessible. And I encourage everyone to check that out.
Yeah, and just kind of on that note, I would consider maybe this whole middle circle here where the circles intersect to be where sustainability exists. So it's the nexus between what you can do, what society needs to accomplish, and that sweet spot in the middle where progress is really being made. And so I hope that a takeaway from this is that while these ideas are tricky on their own to be solved, one day we're not going to wake up and have a totally green economy where everything is invested in all the right places and everything is hunky-dory perfect. There has to be something driving all of that, and it can come from organizing, it can come from individual action, it can come from a place of education. So right here is where those really incredible things happen that have profound effects on kind of turning the trajectory of this crisis as we are seeing it around. So moving on to our last word here. We've talked about how we're entering into all of this. We've talked about what it means for us here and what we're experiencing in our home region. And now we're hoping to end on the point of, okay, we need to feel empowered to do something about it. It's really easy to feel nihilistic that things are just never going to change. But unless we give it a fighting chance to, then that will actually be the case. We have to try our best, and we can't go down without a fight. And lots of really great esteemed climate scientists argue that there is still a chance to turn this thing around to some degree. We can't prevent everything from being affected, but we can prevent a total collapse of the things that they're projecting in the worst case scenario. So that's something that, on a personal note, I kind of use as a guiding light in all of this as a young person, is saying there's still a ton of work to be done with this, and I can't just check out and say it's all doomed, So we have, you'll see right here, this little formula that they talk about a lot in the book, and we've touched on, is that for a really long time, the emphasis was always put on the individual. It's your responsibility to turn the lights out and recycle and so on. And if you're not doing that, you are the reason for this climate crisis that we're in. But the conversation is moving past that a little bit and realizing that there are other layers of accountability in there. It's the big oil corporations, it's government powers, it's local powers, and the individual can also play a role in that in a very real way. But what this book was kind of talking about was individual action is an entry point, but not an end point in how we handle climate issues and environmental changes that we're seeing. So the individual is how you get invigorated about all of this. It's when you start caring and feeling compelled to act. And then the next step from there is engaging community action. So it's saying, I'm going to look around me and see what the possibility is to participate in the spaces that I exist in. So maybe that looks like going to a local environmental commission, which we plug. We have a captain's group. If you want to join that and learn all the tools for that, you can. We're here to kind of empower folks to feel like they have a place at those meetings. And then after this synergy and power builds on local and community levels, then ultimately that is what creates this ripple effect of institutional or large scale change. So while me, little Avery here, can't solve the transition to a green economy on myself, in no way, I do have the power to organize around things that I care about and bring a lot of people into the fold of this messaging. So it's this idea of participation and leaning on each other to accomplish this. So we have a concentric circle here that Grace Ann will talk about a bit more with her activity, but it's showing that different layer of impact. So it's myself, then it's my community, then it's my nation and culture. And on the biggest scale, it's the global world, and everyone who's feeling the effects of climate change, no matter where you are on the planet. And then on the right, this is finding how you can engage in action. Like, what is your next step after we are done this presentation, and what are you going to do, and how are you going to use your skills to create change in this way? So Grace Ann, I will give it to you to talk more about.
I love this Venn diagram on the right hand side so much, and I bring it up constantly with young people. I brought it up to some high school students, and I saw them light up because as a high school student, you're constantly being asked, well, what do you want to do? Who do you want to be? As a college student, what do you want to do? Who do you want to be? And it's daunting in that, and just in that, right, forget climate change, just to be constantly asked that question and not have any clue at the age of 16, 18, 20 years old. But I think this is the type of activity that you should continue doing as a person to bring value to your life and to the world. And so this Venn diagram can continue to change. And I have often challenged myself to think about it, even though I'm very content in where I've landed this far in my own life. But obviously you start with what brings you joy. Britta and others around our organization will constantly emphasize that you are going to be most excited about getting up every day to do something if it brings you joy and happiness and fulfillment. So figure out what gets you up in the morning, what lights your fire, what makes you excited. Then identify what the work is in the world that needs doing. So in this context, we're talking about climate change, but that's daunting and ridiculous to think about at a large scale. So maybe scale it down and think about, so that's kind of where this Venn diagram on the left, or the concentric circles on the left, comes in. What work needs doing in my home? What work needs doing in my neighborhood? Maybe start there, make it really digestible, really easy. Don't overwhelm yourself with trying to save the planet by yourself. And then finally, what are you good at doing? Everyone brings strengths to the table. And one of the things I emphasize with folks all the time is that you do not need to have an environmental science degree to work in environment. It's infuriating that we don't emphasize the fact that we need in environmental anything, organizations, interests, what have you. We need marketers, communicators, graphic designers, teachers, business leaders, health professionals, musicians, artists, communicators, which I think I said. We need every one of those people with all of their skills, assets. We need accountants, we need lawyers, we need real estate agents. I mean, and the list goes on and on and on. Every one of these professions can be tied back into bringing skills to the table that bring skills to this movement. So the Venn diagram does exist on the Jamboard. You can slide over, but I encourage you, if you want to keep it private to yourself, it's a very personal journey, absolutely no judgment. If you are going to put it on the Jamboard, go ahead and select a color and keep your color similar so that everyone can kind of see what color they are. So if you select pink, stay pink across the whole Venn diagram, and see if by flipping from the slides before, look at some of the things you can do. Be civically engaged, work in your yard, drive education, build community, and then kind of distill that down to something you can come up with yourself. And honestly, we're not going to come up with a perfect solution in the next 5 minutes, but hopefully it gets you starting to think about where you are. And I'll just kind of continue talking here as you're thinking about how I fill this out for myself. To give you an example, I'm going to look at it. So what brings me joy? I like performing. I like being a part of an energy driven activity where I'm getting to share my passion and my enthusiasm. And the work that needs doing is, in my view, education, because in my heart, education is the beginning of all behavior change. And what am I good at doing? I am good at getting up in front of a group of people and getting them excited about whatever topic I'm talking about. So in kind of a quick off the cuff example, my nexus in the middle, my little, kind of intersection is being an informal environmental educator. And I kind of landed there on accident, but I went through this process unknowingly as a young professional, and now I feel very solid in my choice. But please don't take this as that you have to do this as a paid profession, and you don't have to be paid full time to do this. This could be something you do as a passion project or part-time. It doesn't have to be something that you get a salaried job to do. I think it's important to understand that this could be anything.
Oh,
This was created by Dr. Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson, who is one of the editors of the anthology All We Can Save, along with Catherine Wilkinson. And there's another Venn diagram that has a similar kind of flavor to it that Dr. Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson didn't create. So I'm guessing she probably based this off of that one. So you might have seen something similar to this in your life experience. The other thing I want to emphasize about our conversation here, because we're going to be wrapping up soon, is that oh my God, the thought like dropped right out of my head. It was there and then it went. This is what happens when you have lots of ideas. Oh, that everyone is welcome to the solutions. Every single person needs to be a part of the solution, and it doesn't matter if you're someone who feels as though you have no technical skills, or if you're someone that has every technical skill in the world and you feel like you can do anything. Every single person in every bit of their existence needs to be a part of this, as well as the idea that every single solution we have for climate change needs to be employed as soon as possible. So you'll hear people debate like, well, do we go towards electric cars? But if we have electric cars and they're feeding off of a, fossil fuel grid, what good is that? Well, scientists are arguing that we in fact need both solutions. We need electric cars and we need a clean grid. We need both. So as an individual, feel empowered that you can bring whatever it is you have to the table, and you don't have to be able to do, I don't know, whatever thing that you feel insecure that you can't do, because all of us have those things. These are awesome. This feels really empowering to see everyone identifying things that they feel they are good at doing.
It's really cool to see everybody's strengths, and I think underscores Grace Ann's point about how it really takes all of us if we want to take these solutions seriously and if we really want to see change. And it's seeing yourself as a valid participator in that change, no matter what you do. You don't have to be a scientist. You don't have to be someone who works at a nonprofit called Save Barnegat Bay. You can be literally anyone.
I had some OCC students at the office yesterday, and the one kid raised his hand and he kind of looked a little skeptical, like, I want to be a baker. Not really sure how that involves anything to do with environment. And then I was like, well, as a person that owns a business, you could make positive choices or good choices about the kind of packaging you choose to package your delicious treats in. And it could be that simple. As a person who's distributing a lot of things, well, that's a whole lot of plastic. So everyone, literally everyone can have a a solution. Sorry, I'm giggling because Katie's cat is just smacking her in the
Your cat is the star of the show tonight.
She is
Aw.
in rare form tonight.
Well, it's always when you have to be on a Zoom meeting that they want attention. Don't you know how this works? So I've only seen one person able to make the connections between their sticky notes. Does anyone want help? Because I think we can, as we finish up here, I think it might be productive to talk about it. Does anyone want some kind of group brainstorming with your color?
Yeah, our hope is kind of as you come out of this conversation, you're like, wow, I have something that I'm going to move forward in doing. I feel empowered to do this thing, and it feels manageable within my skill set and passions.
Would anyone like to share? Maybe you don't want to come to the solution right now, but you want to share your thoughts?
I think it can be done. I'm the pink thing. I think that there's a lot that can be done as long as you understand that you have to become involved. You can't just sit in your house and talk about it or read about it. There are groups now that are forming, especially in our area, to address some of the issues. And I think that you have to look first in your backyard. Is your backyard and your driveway flooding? Then flooding's an issue for you. Are you oceanside? Do you have other kind of, problems with the climate and with the environment? And I think that we need to get actively involved any way we can to start the conversation, if you will, because I've been to those resilient LBI things, and that group came up with all these solutions. If you're Bayside, this is what you should do. If you're Oceanside, this is what you should do. And there it stays on their nice little, colored poster board. Well, where does it go from there? It has to go somewhere from there. And if people don't get involved, it will just stay there. And people can talk about it 20 years from now again. So that's all I know.
All valid.
Very true.
Would anyone else like to share and or find a connection between their stickies?
Sure, I would love to. And I would also appreciate some group input and suggestions if anyone has any for me. I'm the blue sticky notes, and particularly in the vein of conservation, I've kind of made an effort more recently to get more in touch with my creative side, and I've seen the power that sharing things in different ways can really resonate with people. I think my background is I studied science and I had a lot of scientific training. So I was very focused in sort of the numbers and the data. And so ways to translate that is something that I really try to focus on, and something I want to be better about is finding ways to do that more creatively.
Yeah, I think that plays a lot into what Denise was saying also. It makes me think of that, like it's one thing to have all these ideas, and then they just live in a static place where they're not accessible or interpretive to people. It's not achieving any solutions if it stays like that. Sorry, Grayson, were you supposed to say something?
No, it's okay. I actually didn't find this myself. An amazing intern I had 2 summers ago found this. Basically, there's an activity that is led for, I guess, about middle school to high school age students, where they plot on a graph the temperature change in different climates. So, if you want to talk about the Arctic, they plot the changes on a line graph or what have you. And then they're challenged to turn that line graph into a piece of art. So they colored the line graph into the shape of a glacier or a landscape image or an animal, depending on what the line graph looked like. And I think if you're wanting to, kind of tie in your excitement about science and real hard data with your creative side, you could find ways to interpret those graphs in the way of a visual art piece, or if you want to interpret them in a poetic way or describe what you see in like a narrative way. I think that could be a great way to connect the dots, and then helping people understand, find a way to translate this really scary, daunting technical science into a very digestible, approachable piece of art that someone might feel more excited to engage in the conversation about.
And this conversation makes me think of the essay on page 121 called Harnessing Cultural Power, by Fabiana Rodriguez. One of the things that she suggests is important in climate work is including artists and makers in your work. And she has a quote in here that says, "We can use our radical imagination to visualize and manifest another world." And I thought that was really poignant, and is certainly a role that art can play in all of that. It's expressing these visions and needs and deep desires for the world that we're experiencing, but also the one that we want to create for ourselves and others. And art plays such a huge role in that, and would also be something that I'm definitely interested in getting involved with too.
Did that help, Katie?
Yeah, that was awesome. Thanks, guys.
Now with all your free time, you need to start producing art out of all your science, Katie.
Yeah. I expect to see your own show soon.
Oh my goodness. Would anyone else like to share, brainstorm? We have 2 more colors up there.
I'm the green one, but I'll be quick so we can kind of wrap up so everyone can eat dinner and such. I was green. I said that I really love recreating, so hiking, swimming, camping, outdoorsy stuff. And I consider myself to be a pretty good researcher, writer, thinker in that sense. And I have a lot of passion and burning desire to put that somewhere. But also not always really sure what to do with it and how to channel it. I see in front of me that conservation of natural resources is really needed in a fair and equitable way that's accessible to everyone. I think the justice component of this conversation is really important and timely. And I tried to think of what I can do moving forward with this, and a place that I found a lot of meaning and meaningful involvement is in youth-led climate movements, working to organize and influence policy on bigger scales. So I've been involved with groups like Sunrise over the years. I went to school up in Vermont, and I was pretty active in activist organizations and social justice movements that took place in my local city up there. So doing stuff like that has been where I've kind of found the nexus of my interests colliding there. So.
Awesome. So Avery, you have a slide, I think, on your thing, on your PowerPoint, that highlights, if you didn't already have the opportunity to brainstorm your own solution, we came up with a bunch for you. So next week on Wednesday at 6 o'clock, same time, same place, week from today, we will be working through an activity called Climate Fresque. It was started in Europe and it's spread globally. And it's an interactive activity just like this one, using a different program where you slide and click and talk with one another. And the whole idea of this program is that you are learning about the real hard facts about climate change. Nothing where we're smearing the lines or changing the verbiage. We are doing cold hard facts, and it's driven by the IPCC. So if you'd like to participate in that, it's also driven in empathy and togetherness. So I encourage you, if you are unsure about things to do with climate change, you're not sure how to define certain things, it's a great place to learn and work together through those kind of, like Avery keeps saying, those lofty ideas of science. And then Avery heads up our captains group, and there are some captains here with us tonight, so thank you. those of you who
Shout
already
out to the
participated.
captains.
So our captains group is a group of folks that participate at local municipal meetings and report back to Save Barnegat Bay, and it benefits both parties because you as a local person are engaged in your local community, but then conversely, we empower you and give you tools to figure out how to participate in those meetings more effectively. And we are going to be offering educational components to our captains meeting. It's not a high time commitment event. It's once a month, and you don't have to even come to that meeting. You can just submit stuff on our website silently, or you can go to your municipal meeting and not say a word. You don't have to tell everyone who you are or that you're coming from Save Barnegat Bay. It can be completely anonymous. So you really have every opportunity to interface with that program how you see fit and comfortable. And those things are town council meetings, environmental commissions, planning boards, zoning boards, green teams, board of adjustments, school boards, whatever you feel driven to be a part of your local community. And then Avery and I host a podcast where we do something very similar to what we just did tonight, where we discuss with each other these ideas and our programs, and we try to root everything back into our, thank you, Christine, bye. We try to root everything back into our mission. And of course, we can continue posting over and over again how many resources. All You Can Save has a ton of resources, its own podcast, but you can find a lot of good information at savebarnegatbay.org. And I fully encourage all of you, if you have questions that you feel daunted by these solutions and you're kind of still lost about what you can do, definitely reach out to us directly and we can help you workshop through whatever it is you feel you want to be a participant in. So thank you all so much for your patience. This was a slightly longer program, but I think I enjoyed watching you all participate, and I hope you enjoyed participating, and I hope you all feel empowered and excited and feeling less sad about the idea of climate change and more hopeful about the idea that we can all be a part of the solution. So thank you.